course, the computers are always in use. The organisation... Would you choose words number 12? That says to use your word list. All right? Press return. That's it. It says, no, you should have written desk. So now you know look of each of them means desk, and you'll be able to do it. It'll now give you another go, and you'll be able to get it right this time.
This programme tests vocabulary. A French word appears on the screen, and the children type in the English translation. Each correct answer builds the Eiffel Tower one section higher. Well, the setup certainly seems to work, at least the children here enjoy it. Although it doesn't actually provide any more kit per kid. Of course, hardware is only part of the story, so after the news we'll have a look at some educational software.
Illicit users of WordStar are to be offered an amnesty. Sinclair reveal plans to enter the business computer market. And the computer industry jumps on the Band-Aid wagon. Illicit users of the best-selling word processing package WordStar are to be offered an amnesty against prosecution by software house MicroPro. This follows an amendment to the Copyright Act which came into force last month and made the copying of computer programs illegal. Anyone using a pirated version of WordStar can now register with MicroPro for a fee of £40 plus VAT, and in return will become an authorised user. WordStar is probably the most pirated software in the world, and the amnesty is likely to end early next year. After that, MicroPro will be considering prosecuting anyone who is using the package illegally. Sir Clive Sinclair has revealed that Sinclair Research is planning to launch a machine for the professional PC market. He was quoted in the Financial Times as saying that he planned to attack the soft underbelly of IBM. Sinclair seems to have abandoned any hopes of selling the QL as a business machine, but is to draw on the strengths of its operating system and software for his new product. The last few months have been very bad for computer journalism in America. Wendy Woods now reports.
1985 will go down as the worst of times for computer magazines. Nearly 60 have gone out of business, even some big names. December will be the last issue of Popular Computing and Creative Computing, two of America's most widely circulated computer magazines. The main problem is ad revenue. Computer companies with troubles of their own have drastically cut back on advertising, leaving scores of journalists out of work. Reporting from Silicon Valley for Micro Live, I'm Wendy Woods.
After Band-Aid, Live Aid, and this week's Fashion Aid comes the computer industry's contribution to famine relief. Called Online Aid, the idea is that companies contribute sums of money ranging from £1,000 to £5,000 in return for their names featuring in the Online Aid adverts. £250,000 worth of advertising space has already been donated. And finally, tomorrow is the start of National Astronomy Week, and Lancashire Polytechnic is giving away a free computer-based guide to Halley's Comet. It runs on BBC Micros and includes star maps and details of how to spot the comet in the night sky. Any school or organisation can have a copy of the programme by sending a floppy disk or tape and a stamped addressed envelope to Lancashire Polytechnic.
At the beginning of the show, we sent our programme notes to a local printer using cellular radiophone. Earlier this week, Fred went down to Unwin's to take a look at the technology involved.
In a building that once used to be an old paper mill, Unwin's has some of the most sophisticated computer typesetting equipment in the country. This, for example, is a multi-disc reader. It can handle almost any text so long as it's on disc. Here, for example, there's a 5¼ slot, and here's the 3½. And it doesn't even matter which computer you've been using to write your major epic. This machine will read that disk onto the main Miles computer over there. And of course, obviously, it's handy if you've also included control codes to format the text into chapters and paragraphs, italics and bold type and so on. Now, Micro Live's experiment takes all this a few stages further. Obviously, you can read a disk at a distance, providing you're hooked in via a phone line and a modem. But tonight, of course, we're not using a phone line as such. We're using cellular radio. When all that data comes in across the airwaves, it's captured onto disk via this Raycal Vodata modem here at a speed of 1200 bits per second. from the disc to the camera-ready artwork is a matter of a couple of minutes, or in our case, I'm told, 57 seconds. And at this point, we rejoin the age of steam. This cartridge of film here must be developed and then photo-etched onto a plate, ready to roll around a printing press. And that procedure could take anything up to, well, 10 minutes if they're quick. Well, we've just been in touch with Unwin's, the printers. We had a bit of a scare because a fumble-fingered Fred pressed the wrong button and we had to send the data twice. But apparently, sorry about that, the presses are still rolling and the first batch of notes is already finished. Unwin's are very pleased with themselves. It took only 11 minutes, 10 seconds from the time they got the text to the instant it left the press. How are we getting it here? Well, at this very moment, there's a dispatch rider speeding his way to us. He left about a minute ago. And we've also got a backup scheme just in case he can't make it.
Getting computer hardware into schools is all very well, but of course it's the software which matters in the end. It was the Labour government which first saw the need to spend money to create good educational software when Mrs. Shirley Williams was the Education Secretary. When the Tories came to power, they put £9 million into setting up MEP, the Microelectronics Education Programme. Well, with this pump priming money, it's commissioned software and trained teachers in the use of micros. By the way, Scotland has a separate, similar scheme. It's been an uphill struggle. Good software takes a long time to write, it's difficult to specify, and it's got to be very robust if it's not to crash. A typical package may cost £30,000 or more to develop. Since then, from its headquarters in Newcastle, and now with an annual budget of £5 million, MEP has sponsored an impressive array of software, which is marketed through publishers. This summer, at the World Conference for Computer Education held in the United States, British software was considered by many of the delegates to be the best in the world. Here's an example of the sort of real-life problem which has inspired software writers to take British software, and by the way, Himalayan climbers like my friend Chris Bonington, to the very top.
I spent months actually planning the expedition. We had to get the right amount of rope, we had to get the right amount of food, we had to make sure that all our Sherpas were firstly the right number of them, and then we had to have them in the right place at the right time. And to do all this, I actually used a computer and played out a computer game of actually climbing the mountain with all the hazards that we might encounter. And this meant that when I was actually on the climb, when we were faced with some kind of crisis, it meant that I could actually react to it because I'd actually played it out back at home on the computer.
Chaz, Wendy and Julian here are working with a programme that's based on Bonington's ascent of Everest. It's called Summit, and by taking into account the sort of information about the geography and the weather conditions on the mountain, what they're doing is working out how best to plan the climb and then use the manpower available to move essential stores up the mountain and generally keep the expedition supplied. In fact, you're making sort of life and death decisions, aren't you, standing here?
Yes.
Well, you've been circling about with this during the day. Have you managed to form an opinion of it? Do you think it's good educational software?
Yeah, we think it's exciting. I mean, we have to decide for the team if they're going to live or die, basically, because we have to get the stores up to them.
So that really does make quite a difference,
yes.
The fact that it could possibly be a real-life situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Decision-making programme.
Yeah. Well, what are you actually learning? I mean, apart from the excitement, what part of the academic syllabus are you covering here?
Well, you need very careful planning to plan the stores to take up to the men on the mountain. And this also includes a little maths, but we didn't really feel there was a lot of geography in the game.
Right. Tell me, how would you have felt about dealing with these problems that you're grappling with if they'd all just been laid out in a textbook?
I don't think it would have been so interesting.
I mean, I'll put the book down.
You'd put the book down. Right, well, carry on up the mountain. Don't get frostbite. With us this evening as well is Richard Fothergill, Director of MEP. Richard, did you hear that just then? There's not enough geography in the geography package.
Yes, well, a good piece of software should cover a wide range of activities. They were doing problem solving, making good decisions. They were doing mathematics. There's a lot of writing going to develop from that sort of work. So it covers a wide range of aspects of the curriculum and not just geography. And that's what all good computer software is doing these days.
So you're looking for it to have sort of related work. But what about, I mean, they use the software for, what, half an hour, an hour? Do they then just put it away in a drawer and that's it?
Well, good software, again, should be just part of a whole learning activity. So in this particular case, one would expect work on how the Sherpas live in Nepal, living conditions. You could have work on what the human body does as it adjusts to changes in temperature and going up mountains and oxygen failure. You could have landform as crevasses are formed and so on. A lot of meteorology as the different snow conditions. So there's a great deal of other work that's going on as well, and this is just one of the resources and one of the stimulants.
So half an hour of software should provide weeks and weeks, really, of very wide teaching.
Indeed.
OK, what else have you got to show us?
Well, one program which I thought you might be interested in is the mole concept. This program was developed with BBC Radio, schools radio, and it consists of notes, teachers' notes, a disc with the software on it, and an audio cassette. Now, the interesting thing is you put the audio cassette into the cassette recorder, the disc into the disc drive, and the two parts run together simultaneously. They're synchronized together. So that here is a very difficult chemical concept. A lot of children find it very hard to understand. You get a voice supporting the software as it goes along. And if we listen to this for a moment, you may recognize the voice.
Right.
Mention the word mole to most people, and this is what they think of. A short-sighted garden pest. But to a scientist, the word mole means something altogether different. In chemistry, a mole is a number, an amount, an astronomically huge amount. To understand why we need such a huge amount, we must first think about things which are infinitesimally small. Atoms. Atoms are often depicted rather like this. A heavy core with lighter particles which orbit around it. Remember that this is not intended to be a true picture of an atom.
Now, the pictures and the words are absolutely smashing, but wouldn't they do just as well on video?
No, because this is an interactive program. That chime you heard just now asked the children to press the space bar on the computer to move the program on. And they will be, in a moment, as you see, answering questions, which check how far they have got as they go along through the program. And then later, we will find that at the end of the program, there'll be a simulation of a important experiment for them to develop. And this will be a very interactive activity for them.
So they're actually moving the program along with the speed of their own progress?
Yes, indeed they are,
Excellent.
and that's the key of it.
Right, well, let's see what else Fred's got to say.
But remember, a mole is an amount. It's a number of things. You can't have a mole on its own, any more than you can have a dozen or a million. You must say what the objects are. A dozen eggs. 1,000,000 pounds. A mole of ping-pong balls. If you had a mole of ping-pong balls, you'd have trouble storing them. They'd cover the entire Earth to a depth which would swamp Mount Everest.
Now, as we've just seen, and as I said, that particular program ends with a titration experiment, a simulation of that. It is very important that children do the practical work as well. And this is another experiment, a program which based itself on a well-known physics experiment for 17 to 18-year-olds. Now, this one is for physics, and it creates a sort of micro-laboratory in which you can look at the way an object goes up and down against gravity and with different forms of velocity and what happens to its weight and displacement. So three very important physical principles are established and looked at: displacement theory, acceleration, and velocity. And a child can explore all sorts of parameters, about 26 different variations in the way they look at this and the different displays.
Why is British software considered to be relatively so good?
I think for three reasons, really. One, we make very good use of graphics. Secondly, we are very teacher-orientated in the development. Teachers are always involved all the time. And thirdly, we look at the concepts of learning. So we're asking children to develop skills like problem solving, like design, like making things, like creativity, exploring their mind and discovering information. That's the exciting bit.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks very much indeed.
Pleasure.